The first wedding of Mary, Queen of Scots. The union of Mary, Queen of Scots, and Francis, Dauphin of France, was a significant event in European history, culminating in their marriage at Notre Dame de Paris on the 24th of April 1558. The occasion was marked by elaborate festivities, including theatrical pageants. Mary Stuart ascended the Scottish throne as an infant after the death of her father, King James V, in December of 1542. Her early reign was marred by the controversial proposal to wed her to Edward, the Prince of Wales, which ignited the rough wooing, a series of conflicts between Scotland and England. To secure her safety and strengthen political alliances, Mary was sent to France under an agreement ratified in 1548, and she arrived at the French court to be raised alongside the royal children, Elizabeth and Claude of Valois. Her engagement to Francis, the heir to the French throne, was part of a strategic alliance between France and Scotland. Mary's mother, Mary of Guise, ruled Scotland as regent and saw the marriage as a way to solidify her influence and align Scotland more closely with France. She believed that marrying her daughter to the Dauphin would bolster her pro-French stance, especially in the face of opposition from Scottish nobles who feared the erosion of traditional laws and increased French control. The marriage was seen as a way to stabilise Scotland through a powerful Franco-Scottish alliance, despite concerns about Mary's health and the political ramifications of such a union. Henry II of France, acting as Scotland's protector, also played a pivotal role in the marriage negotiations. Although some members of the French court, including Anne de Montmorency, opposed the match due to the increased power that it would grant Mary's uncles, the Duke and Cardinal of Guise, Henry II supported the union as a strategic move to strengthen his hold over Scotland. The wedding, celebrated with grandeur, symbolised a consolidation of power and the intertwining of French and Scottish interests. For Mary of Guise, it was a triumph that fortified her position and ensured her daughter's status as a key player in European politics. The marriage not only reinforced the alliance between the two nations, but also set the stage for future conflicts and alliances that would shape the political landscapes of the time. In 1558, Scottish commissioners faced disputes regarding the terms of France's role after his marriage to Mary, Queen of Scots. They opposed suggestions that he should be crowned in France with the Scottish regalia, although he was expected to assume the title of King of Scotland with the crown matrimonial. Earlier that year, on the 4th of April, Mary had already signed crucial documents at the palace, and these agreements outlined the transfer of her rights to the Scottish throne to France in the event of her death, and obligated Scotland to reimburse the French crown for the financial support during the rough wooing. It is believed that these terms, which heavily favoured France, were unknown to the Scottish commissioners. The formal betrothal of Mary and Francis took place at the Louvre on the 19th of April, 1558. Both signed a marriage contract, with Mary affirming her consent, with advice from the three estates of Scotland and her grandmother. Following the formalities, there was a celebratory dance, and during this, Antoine confided in the Venetian ambassador, Giovanni, about the internal court controversies surrounding the marriage. Notably, Anne de Montmorency had advocated for delaying the wedding. This event, sometimes referred to as Mary's hand fasting, was mentioned in early translations of John Leslie's History of Scotland. Giovanni described it as the day of giving of hand. The Scottish negotiators involved in the marriage contracts, including James Stuart, Commendator of St Andrews, and the Earl of Cassily, had to secure personal loans from an Italian financier. This was to cover their travel expenses. Tragically, several diplomats, including Cassilis and Robert Reid, Bishop of Orkney, died in Paris on their way back to Scotland, possibly due to the plague. However, some chroniclers and opponents of Mary suggested that they were poisoned as part of a plot. The wedding ceremony was held at Notre Dame de Paris, with a specially constructed platform linking the bishop's palace to the church. This grand stage, described as a theatre or scaffold with a gallery, hosted the procession. The elaborate nature of the event echoed the wedding of Mary's father, James V, to Madeleine of Valois in 1537. Several detailed contemporary accounts of the wedding survive, highlighting the pomp and ceremony of the occasion. The grandiosity of the event underscored the political and cultural significance of the union, reinforcing the alliance between Scotland and France. On her wedding day, Mary, Queen of Scots, dazzled in a resplendent gown of silver fabric, which featured a modest train, and draped over her shoulders was a magnificent purple mantle, intricately embroidered with gold and boasting an extended train. The centerpiece of her regal ensemble was a striking crown adorned with a notable ruby, famously called the Egg of Naples, prominently positioned at her forehead. Contemporary French accounts refer to this gemstone as a carbuncle, estimating its value to be over 500,000 écus. Another version of her attire describes her donning a gown of luxurious Persian velvet, intricately sewn with jewels and white embroidery. Mary's necklace, a wedding gift from King Henry II and Queen Catherine de Medici, featured a stunning ruby and diamond pendant, later celebrated as the Great H of Scotland. Records reveal that Catherine de Medici procured a diamond for the necklace from merchants in Lyon, while additional pearls and a ruby were purchased to complete the exquisite piece, likely assembled by Mary's goldsmith. The nuptial service was officiated by Charles II, Cardinal de Bourbon, while the Bishop of Paris delivered a sermon and conducted a mass. After the religious ceremony, the royal party retired to the bishop's palace for a celebratory feast and dancing. Meanwhile, Parisian officials and dignitaries gathered at a nearby house, which proved too small for the large attendance. A grand supper was held in the great hall of the palace, where guests dined at a marble table. The evening's entertainment featured an array of music. Following the meal, guests enjoyed performances and mass, with Charles, Cardinal of Lorraine, overseeing the elaborate preparations and heraldic displays that adorned Notre Dame and the Grand Salle. One of the evening's highlights was a display involving 12 mechanical horses adorned in gold and silver cloth, which were paraded into the hall. The final act featured 6 ships crafted to appear as if sailing on artificial waves, their sails animated to mimic gusty winds. These ships, draped in the red and gold colours of the House of Stuart, carried masked members of the court, disguised as Turkish sailors. The ships sailed across the hall, picking up dance partners, including Mary herself, before departing with their passengers, symbolizing the bride and groom's departure for the night. This grand pageant was a masterwork of an Italian artist who was renowned for his innovative designs. Following the formal announcement of Mary, Queen of Scots' marriage to Francis, Dauphin of France, on the 26th of June 1558, her mother, Mary of Guise, Regent of Scotland, commanded the lighting of celebratory bonfires across the nation. Edinburgh marked this historic union with a grand event on the High Street on 5th of July 1558, symbolising the renewal of the old alliance between Scotland and France. The festivities featured a pageant orchestrated by local playwrights, using fabrics from the royal wardrobe for costumes crafted by Patrick Doraine. A striking spectacle, the pageant included a decorated cart and artificial fruit trees, representing the 7 planets in Cupid, designed by painter Walter Binning. This theme mirrored similar court festivities in Paris. Catherine Michelson, Lady Carnock, was notably attired in a special gown, likely for her role in the pageant. Edinburgh Castle's famed cannon was restored to fire a celebratory shot, its impact felt as far as Wardy. Permanent tributes to the wedding may have been reflected in the heraldic carvings at Holyrood Palace. In November 1558, the Scottish Parliament heard the Marriage Commissioner's report and granted Francis the Scottish crown matrimonial. This decision granted new trade privileges to French citizens in Scotland, mirroring reciprocal benefits in France. However, the growing influence of France in the Catholic Church under Mary of Guise sparked resistance. Protestant reformers, known as the Lord of Congregation, began challenging her regency, fearing the loss of Scottish autonomy. John Knox criticised Mary of Guise's efforts to secure the union, arguing that Scotland had surrendered its sovereignty to France. The tensions would later culminate in the conflict between the Protestant lords and the regents. The death of Mary I of England in November 1558 brought Mary, Queen of Scots, into the line of succession for the English throne, a claim that agitated Elizabeth I. Reports of heraldic displays at the French court combining the arms of Mary and Francis with those of England added to the tension. Although the English College of Arms dismissed these claims, Elizabeth was displeased, leading to diplomatic friction. Elizabeth sent Peter Mutas to offer condolences on the death of Henry II of France, but tensions remained, highlighted by incidents such as the display of provocative heraldry on silver plates. This diplomatic strain was exacerbated by discussions on Scotland's status, leading Elizabeth to support Protestant forces against Mary of Guise through the Treaty of Berwick and the subsequent siege of Leith. After their wedding, Mary and Francis moved to a chateau. Following the death of Henry II in July 1559, Francis II was crowned at Rheims, with Mary present but without a ceremonial role. Despite rumours of pregnancy in 1559, the couple focused on their royal duties, including ceremonial entries and managing the tensions of the Amboise conspiracy in 1560. In April 1560, amid the Reformation crisis, Mary and Francis authorised diplomats to negotiate with England and Scotland. The death of Mary of Guise in June 1560 led to the Treaty of Edinburgh, settling the conflict in Scotland. Mary and Francis had limited involvement in the treaty's details, as their reign was cut short by Francis's death in December 1560. This ended their brief but impactful union. The second wedding of Mary, Queen of Scots. In February 1565, a meeting between Mary, Queen of Scots, and Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, was arranged. The two were not unfamiliar with each other. Mary had encountered Darnley on a number of occasions in the past. During his youth, Darnley had visited the French court, where Mary had spent much of her early life. Their reunion took place at Wemyss Castle in East Wemyss, a somewhat secluded location, likely chosen to keep the gathering away from prying eyes of the court. It was clear that love and marriage were on the horizon. At 22, Mary was a tall, wealthy, and influential figure, celebrated for her beauty. She was a sovereign of Scotland, the widowed Queen of France, and had ambitions for the English throne. Having been a widow for over 4 years, she was seeking both an heir and some romantic fulfillment. Darnley, then 19, was known for his vanity, ambition, arrogance, and libertine lifestyle. Yet he was also tall, elegant, and notably handsome, with a talent for playing the lute. Mary described him as the most handsome and well-proportioned tall man she had seen. Darnley had also caught the eye of Mary's cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, during his time at the English court. Crucially, he shared a direct lineage from King Henry VII of England, a heritage Mary also possessed. Their combined lineage solidified their Tudor ties, and their son James would ultimately ascend to the English throne. What started as a courtship at whims quickly blossomed into a passionate romance. Mary even cared for Darnley during an illness, which was possibly syphilis. The couple tied the knot in Edinburgh a few months later, on the 29th of July 1565. Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, the son of the Earl of Lennox, was a noble lineage, with both Scottish and Tudor royal blood. Born in England in 1545, the same year that his family's Scottish lands were seized, he saw their restoration in 1564. In early 1565, Darnley travelled to Edinburgh, and at 19 he was tall, handsome, well-educated, sophisticated, and a devout Roman Catholic. He immediately made his presence known to Mary, Queen of Scots, who, as a fellow Catholic, was in search of both a husband and an heir. Mary, struck by his looks, described him as the lustiest and best-proportioned young man that she had seen. Her feelings for him soon grew into deep infatuation. On the 22nd of July 1565, the marriage banns were announced, and just days later, on the 28th of July, it was declared that Scotland would be ruled jointly by the King and Queen of Scots. The couple married the following day. Their wedding took place at 6 a.m. in the Chapel Royal of Holyrood Palace. The 22-year-old bride wore a black widow gown, while her 19-year-old groom dazzled in a jewel-encrusted outfit. He placed a diamond ring and 2 others on her finger before departing for the nuptial mass, a moment that hinted at the growing distance between them. Despite this, the celebrations were grand. Trumpets announced their union, followed by a lavish wedding feast with 16 courses of game, chicken and lamb. Music and dancing filled the palace, and gold and silver coins were thrown to the crowd outside. The festivities continued with feasts, masques, and dancing for the next 3 nights. After a brief honeymoon, they returned to Holyrood. Though Darnley fulfilled his duties as a husband and Mary became pregnant by September, the marriage quickly soured. She realized he was self-absorbed, arrogant, and dangerously scheming, often collaborating with her Protestant enemies. Their son, James, was born in 1566, but by then Mary's infatuation had faded. She began an affair with the ruthless Earl of Bothwell, and by February 1567, Darnley and his valet were found murdered at Kirkhope Field in Edinburgh, their deaths the result of a gunpowder explosion in Darnley's chamber. The fallout from this failed marriage was profound. Their son, James, eventually ascended to the thrones of both Scotland and England as James VI and I. The marriage's demise also caused tension. Darnley's Catholicism alarmed Scotland's Protestant lords and raised concerns in Elizabeth I's court. His immature behaviour and insatiable ambition soon frustrated both Mary and those around her. The relationship grew increasingly strained, culminating in Darnley's involvement in the murder of Mary's secretary, David Riccio, in her chambers at Holyrood House. The turbulent relationship between Mary and Darnley unfolded across numerous historical sites, including several properties that are now managed by Historic Scotland. During the chase about raid in September 1565, Mary and Darnley spent a night at Hunting Tower Castle. This marked a rare moment of triumph for the royal couple, as they jointly led an army against Protestant rebels. In June 1566, Mary gave birth to their only child, the future James VI and I, in Edinburgh Castle. However, Darnley was not present for the birth of his son. Later that year, in October 1566, Mary visited the wounded Earl of Bothwell at Hermitage Castle, likely on official matters. This visit would later be cited as evidence of an affair between the two, a relationship that would culminate in Mary's marriage to Bothwell. In November and December 1566, Mary visited the wounded Earl of Bothwell at Hermitage Castle. In November and December 1566, Mary moved to Craigmillar Castle to recover from a serious illness. It was during this time that her court began conspiring against Darnley. At Stirling Castle in December 1566, while grand celebrations were held for the baptism of Prince James, Darnley lingered in the background. Meanwhile, Bothwell was gifted a fine suit by Mary, further fueling rumours about their growing relationship. The conspiracy against Darnley, known as the Craigmillar Bond, was set into motion and came to a deadly climax on the night of February the 9th, 1567. While Mary attended the wedding of her servant, Darnley recovered from an illness, and he stayed at Provost House in Kirkhope Field, Edinburgh. At around 2 a.m., 2 barrels of gunpowder placed beneath Darnley's room exploded. It is unclear whether Darnley was removed from his bed before the explosion, or if he managed to stagger out of the ruined house. Regardless, he didn't get far. His body, along with that of his valet, was later found in a nearby orchard, both smothered to death. Once again, Mary found herself a widow. Darnley's murder set off a chain of events that would unravel her reign. The third wedding of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary, Queen of Scots, is one of Scotland's most renowned historical figures. Born at Lindengrow Palace in 1542, she became queen just 6 days later, following the death of her father. As his only legitimate heir, Mary ascended to the throne at an incredibly young age. At the age of 5, Mary was sent to France as part of an arranged marriage to the French Dauphin of France. Tragically, Francis passed away in 1561, leaving Mary a widow. She returned to a divided Scotland, where tensions between Protestants and Catholics were escalating due to the Reformation. In a bid to stabilise her rule, remarrying seemed the most sensible option. Mary's second marriage to Lord Darnley would prove to be a tragic and tumultuous union, further complicating her reign. Lord Darnley was far from popular, and the relationship quickly soured. His jealousy towards Mary's secretary, David Riccio, grew, culminating in Darnley's involvement in the brutal murder of Riccio in front of the Queen. Meanwhile, Darnley's behaviour became increasingly erratic. He spent long nights drinking and having affairs, neglecting his responsibilities as a husband. In February 1567, an explosion rocked the Edinburgh residence where Darnley had been staying. However, it was not the explosion that claimed his life. His body was discovered outside the property, unharmed by the blast, but showing signs of strangulation. Suspicion surrounding Darnley's murder soon turned towards the Earl of Bothwell, who would become Mary's next husband. A few months after the trial, Bothwell was acquitted, and he and Mary wed in Edinburgh. Immediately, rumours began circulating that Darnley's murder had been a crime of passion, allegedly committed by Bothwell and Mary. Many critics pointed to the lack of thorough investigation into Bothwell's possible role in Darnley's death, fueling suspicions. Court gossip even suggested that Mary might have been pregnant before the wedding, and that she and Bothwell had been having an affair prior to Darnley's murder. The marriage also sparked widespread anger. Catholics in Scotland were upset, believing that Mary was showing a lack of devotion to her faith, especially since the wedding ceremony was Protestant. Protestant lords who already disliked Bothwell were equally displeased with the union. On the 15th of May 1567, Queen Mary of Scots entered into her third marriage, this time to James Hepburn, the 4th Earl of Bothwell. Just days before the wedding, on the 12th of May, Mary elevated Bothwell's status, making him Duke of Orkney, a significant move that solidified his position in both her court and Scottish nobility. The ceremony, held in accordance with Protestant rites, was notably small, with very few attendees. The guests included the couple's personal servants and four of Mary's most trusted lifelong friends: Mary Seton, Mary Beaton, Mary Fleming, and Mary Livingston. This small gathering was a stark contrast to the highly public weddings of other royals, further adding to the intrigue and controversy surrounding the event. On her wedding day, Mary wore a striking black gown, which served as a symbol of her mourning for her second husband, Lord Darnley, who had tragically been murdered the previous year. However, this was not a typical mourning dress. Crafted from luxurious black velvet, the gown was embroidered with intricate gold and silver threads, a detail that elevated the attire far beyond conventional mourning fashion. The heavy symbolism of the black gown was combined with a touch of grandeur, reflecting both her sorrow and her royal status. The ceremony was presided over by a relative of Bothwell, who also held the title of the legitimate Bishop of Orkney, further cementing the marriage's official standing. James Hepburn, the new Duke of Orkney and Mary's third husband, had just finalised his divorce from his previous wife, Jean Gordon, before marrying Mary. His controversial and swift rise in both social and political standing was partly due to his close relationship with Mary, which had already caused much scandal in the court. To understand the significance of Mary's decision to marry Bothwell, it's important to know her own complex background. Mary was born on the 8th of December 1542, the daughter of King James V of Scotland and Mary de Guise. Upon her father's death, she became Queen of Scotland at just 6 days old. As an infant queen, she was initially placed under the regency of James Hamilton, the second Earl of Arran, and later her mother, Mary de Guise, who became the regent during Mary's early years. Mary's heritage was marked by her maternal connection to the Tudor dynasty. Through her grandmother, Margaret Tudor, Mary was related to Henry VIII of England, which made her a key figure in the political struggles between England and Scotland. Raised in the French court after being sent there at the age of 5, Mary was groomed for marriage to Francis, the Dauphin, heir to the French throne. After Francis's premature death in 1560, Mary returned to Scotland, a young widow in a country fraught with religious and political upheaval, which would ultimately play a role in the decisions that she made, including her marriage to Bothwell. Bothwell was implicated in Darnley's death, and there were rumours that Mary was involved as well. Their controversial marriage caused uproar among the Scottish nobility, leading them to raise an army against her. Mary was imprisoned at Lochleven Castle, which is where she was reported to have miscarried twins fathered by Bothwell. On the 25th of July 1567, Mary was forced to abdicate, and her son James became king, with Mary's half-brother James Stuart acting as regent. In May 1568, Mary escaped her prison and fled to England. In June, a coalition of Protestant lords raised an army against Queen Mary. This led to her confrontation with Bothwell at the Battle of Carberry Hill. Despite its name, the battle involved no combat, only intense negotiations, and in the end, Mary was betrayed and captured. Held under house arrest, Mary spent her final night in Edinburgh at her residence on Stuart's Close. Mary was subsequently taken to Lochleven Castle and imprisoned. However, on the 2nd of May, she managed a daring escape and gathered an army to reclaim her throne. Unfortunately, her forces were defeated at the Battle of Longside. After this defeat, Mary fled to England, hoping that her cousin, Queen Elizabeth I, would assist her in regaining the Scottish throne. Instead, Elizabeth placed Mary under house arrest, suspecting her of plotting to claim the English crown. As a result, Mary was charged with treason. In 1587, a tragic misinterpretation of a letter from Elizabeth I led to Mary's execution. The men responsible for this misunderstanding were imprisoned in the Tower of London for over a decade as punishment. Bothwell, after fleeing to Dunbar, never saw Mary again, and he eventually died in Denmark in 1578. Mary's son, James, ascended the Scottish throne, and following Elizabeth I's death, also became King of England, uniting the two crowns.